Hello and welcome once again to The Blueprint. This is Canada's Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, with new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe this program. You can also tell your friends to download it at platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. On today's show, we are talking about the economy, international trade, interprovincial trade, and much, much more. To do that, we bring on the industry critic, the Member of Parliament for South Shore St. Margaret's, Rick Perkins. Thanks for coming on.
Always a pleasure to be here, James.
It's great to have you on. We always have great content. Yeah. And of course, there's lots going on, especially with the economy, especially with different provinces looking to finally do business with each other. That's great news. Yeah. Many business leaders that I've spoken with, and I'm sure you have, and our viewers and listeners have probably read about, have always been talking about it being easier to do business with another country than it is in other provinces.
I think we've been talking about this since before I was born as a country, and certainly a lot after the free trade agreement with the United States was signed in 1988. It was like, how come we can get free trade with the United States and other countries, but we can't do it interprovincially? And it's hugely, hugely costly. There are incredible examples of things that would just blow people away, whether it's labor standards, which are different in every province, and you're not licensed in one versus another. I'll give you an example. I was at a trade school event with Pierre in Sackville, and this fellow comes up to Pierre and myself and says, "We need your help. There's this really new, innovative, and very safe scaffolding for the building renovation we have to do. And we've been waiting 2 years for the Nova Scotia government to approve it for occupational health and safety." I said, "Yeah." He said, "But it's already approved in 3 other provinces." So that's the kind of barrier that's there that says, well, why is it that if it's okay for this scaffolding to be used in a building in Ontario and they've met the standards, that you can't use it in Nova Scotia? The bureaucracy in Nova Scotia churns away waiting to get its turn to certify this particular scaffolding. Multiply that by essentially every single industry. People know about the booze stuff and the wine and the beer, and well, maybe they don't. Crossing a provincial border with alcohol in your car is actually breaking a law. Isn't that ridiculous?
A little bit, yes. And I think people are kind of waking up, if they weren't already, to the fact that you're right. It is very difficult to trade items back and forth in our own country, and billions of dollars of lost productivity because of that.
Yeah. Well, the great thing about all of this discussion, it appears that for the first time in a long time, the premiers are committing to do this in a serious way. The premier of the province I represent, Tim Houston from Nova Scotia, I actually had a conversation with him a week and a half ago on this, and he is very committed to removing some of these barriers. I've sent him some information from things I've worked on in the past provincially to help him on that. And the easiest way to do it on a lot of these things is called reciprocity. So the idea is that we don't have to sit there with 13 governments and figure out what each standard should be in each and agree on that.
Forever.
It'll never happen, right?
That's what has it.
There is this interprovincial free trade agreement that is over 300 pages long, and almost 200 pages of that's actually exceptions.
Yeah, exactly.
They spent more time working on the exceptions to the trade than they did on what you could actually move. And so reciprocity is just saying, look, if you're certified for whatever your industry is, you know, whether you're a nurse, whether you're a trade, whether it's equipment, whether you're a truck, if you're certified in one province, we recognize that in any other province.
That's pretty
all
simple.
They have to do is pass a law like that in every province, and that gets rid of a massive amount of the bureaucracy and inefficiency and cost. And that cost has been estimated at $5,100 a household in Canada every single year. It's crazy that we can, trade with the US, trade with Europe. 99% of things we send to Europe are tariff-free, but we can't do it between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick.
Yeah, that's incredible. Not only can we do that, but we can't get many of our resources, natural resources, to market. And we've talked about, I can't tell you how many times, about the Energy East pipeline, which would bring Alberta's energy into New Brunswick, Northern Gateway, and many other projects have been canceled under this Liberal government. But finally, they have realized that maybe times have changed. Look at our industry minister, your minister that you critic. Look at that. Times have changed. Unbelievable. They canceled. They changed the regulatory process midstream, made it too cumbersome for the proponent to go ahead, canceled it, and now they're saying, yeah, you know what?
You know, the king of word salad here,
Yeah.
Minister Champagne, is typical of all the hypocrites in the Trudeau government and the candidates running, the flip-flopping candidates running for their leadership. They're just more of the same,
Yeah.
where a month before an election, after 10 years in power, they've discovered the economy as opposed to the other things that they've been focused on. Energy East, to my neighborhood, is a great example. There's a lot of myth out there. They like to spread that the company chose not to pursue it. Well, why did the company choose not to pursue it? It chose not to pursue it because this minister, as part of the Trudeau government, as well as Wilkinson, Trudeau, and the rest, put in two bills, the C-69 and the anti-tanker bill and the anti-pipeline bill. I call them the no capital bills. And what that did is that made the environmental process for energy projects and big projects take 10 years plus. Well, I spent most of my career in business. No company will sit there allocating capital for 10 years out from now. They'll go to a jurisdiction where they can get this done quicker. And there is oil and gas in other parts of the world. The result is, in my part of the world in Atlantic Canada, we actually heat our homes with Saudi Arabian oil, believe it or not. It comes in tankers because we can't get good, clean Canadian oil. We have to use dirty Saudi Arabian oil to heat our homes. No, we don't have natural gas into our homes like a lot of the other provinces do. Why? Because we have no natural gas pipeline to Atlantic Canada. We have no oil pipeline to Atlantic Canada. So we have to import oil from Saudi Arabia, which is refined in St. John, New Brunswick, and then distributed to the provinces. Yeah, we produce a lot of oil and gas off of Newfoundland, but that gets exported from Newfoundland. It doesn't actually come to the rest of Atlantic Canada. So these guys, all of a sudden, who destroyed everything, destroyed the 3 pipelines that were in progress out west by their regulatory legislative agenda to kill the oil and gas industry. Make no mistake, they had no other agenda.
Yes, sir.
And Wilkinson and these guys have all said, no, we don't want oil and gas in Canada. We want it gone. And now they're saying, well, maybe
It's not a bad idea.
after 10 years, maybe we made a mistake. No, they didn't say that,
No,
did they?
no.
They said what? What did he say?
Now
Times have changed.
Well, they memory hold the past 10 years. Yeah,
well, never mind what we did for 10 years.
Don't worry about it.
A month before the election, we discovered religion.
Now today, well, they'd have to repeal those major bills just to get anything going. But now, a kind of a regular on our program here, the foreign minister, Melanie Joly, because of her outrageous comments that she keeps making that just are somewhat laughable. Now, she's also discovering the economy and the benefits of trade. Play cut 1.
To prepare our long-term response, because we know that we are over-reliant on the American market. So we need to make sure that there's less commercial barriers between, for example, my home province of Quebec and Ontario than actually Quebecers or Ontarians exporting to the U.S. We need to make sure that there's no hurdles across the country. We also need to diversify our markets across the country. And so we have a really good team of different ministers working on that, and we'll continue to do.
The beauty about that is she's acting like she just discovered it. Like, this is just, my goodness, we need to get to the bottom of this.
You'd think they only just got elected for the first time,
incredible.
and this was part of their agenda, that they hadn't been in power for 10 years and tried to do something about it. Melanie Joly is a member of Parliament in Montreal.
Yep.
She also ran for mayor. The mayor of Montreal, who beat her, was one of the main proponents of stopping Energy East, saying there's no social license. Last time I checked, municipal governments actually don't have a say in the Constitution over these things. But she's discovering all these things. Her province, maybe she should work on the provincial liquor board in her province, which will not allow people to order BC wine in Quebec and have it shipped directly from the winery into Quebec. The SAQ in Quebec doesn't allow it. But now she's discovered maybe that we should start doing this after 10 years. My question is, why should Canadians believe anything they say when they've done the opposite for the last 10 years and now want to be reelected in the next month or two on a complete reversal of everything they've done for 10 years?
It just goes to show, like, we've been pointing it out. I was elected in 15, you were 19, 20. Oh, okay, well, there you go, okay. We've all been talking about this for years, how uncompetitive the trade barriers, we had the Free the Beer campaign, that was I know you said earlier it involves alcohol, but so much more. But it was easy to kind of explain to people because they're like, yeah, you can't drive across provincial boundaries with.
It was actually the Supreme Court who ended up ruling on those charges and said, no, you can't do that. They made him pour his beer out, charged him, and went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, no, you can't go to Quebec, buy a case of beer and get some gas, and drive back over the border into New Brunswick with that beer in your car. It's unbelievable. That's monstrously costly, not just for businesses, but for consumers. Because all those costs get passed on to you and me and everybody watching, and driving the price of everything up.
Yeah, well, when Harper took power, there were only a handful of free trade deals around the world. When he left office in 2015, there were over 50.
Right.
So he saw the vision, right?
Right.
He saw the vision that we should not be so reliant on the United States, that we need to diversify, tried to start that moving, and now we have the trade minister, let's cue up cut 2, realizing that too, play cut 2.
We should be looking at those very things and those very infrastructure things that are going to be important for Canada and for how they can enable our diversification into the future to the betterment of the Canadian economy.
But as Minister of International Trade, why weren't you thinking about that before?
We've been absolutely focused on making sure that there are broad access markets for Canadian businesses around the world, and we have succeeded. I mean, we succeeded in
but for oil and gas in particular.
See, Varying, the trade minister, was caught off guard, right? They haven't thought of this. They haven't been advancing that trade agenda with other countries around the world. A major failure, especially at a time like this.
No, in fact, when we had the Chancellor of Germany here with the Prime Minister, who wanted our natural gas so that we could stop the flow of natural gas from Russia to Germany, the Prime Minister had the gall to say, there's no business case. And there is a business case when you have a customer in front of you saying, I want your gas.
Not just one, there's been a couple world leaders.
There's been a couple of them. And they're right in front of you saying, I want your gas, I'll buy it. And you say, well, there's no business case. I guess he doesn't understand a business case requires somebody to sell, but also somebody to buy. And there's somebody wanting to buy, but nobody willing to sell. And the minister doesn't understand that basic concept that they weren't doing that. And on top of all that, she says, we need to build the infrastructure. Well, they put all the blockades in place to stop that infrastructure from being built. And now they just can't seem to get the concept. And on top of that, perhaps the biggest one is the free trade agreement that the Harper government did with Europe. That gives us access, 99% tariff-free, to the second largest consumer market in the world. So it was signed just at the end of the Harper government. And the government has done nothing, this Liberal government has done absolutely nothing to actually try and facilitate and encourage that trade, to diversify the markets, as she said, for 10 years. But for 10 years, they've had that agreement in place that the Harper government negotiated and frittered it away. Wouldn't sell them our natural resources. Doesn't matter whether it was oil and gas, whether it was our lumber, whether it was our renewable fish resources. They did absolutely nothing to do that. And now on the eve of an election where after 10 years Canadians are looking for change, they're saying, oh, well, maybe we should actually have paid a little bit of attention to this now. So never mind what we did for the last 10 years to kill the Canadian.
We got it now.
We got it now. We killed the economy for the last 10 years.
That's right.
But I think we finally got the message. They're slow learners.
Well, they figured out who was in charge and what the problems were, and it was them and their policies.
Yeah, exactly.
Unbelievable. Looks like anything could happen. Mark Carney looks like he's going to waltz right into the leadership of the federal Liberals. He's just the same as Justin Trudeau on carbon taxes, on the managed economy with government permission to manufacture things. Like, this is going to be more of the same, more pain, more misery for Canadians.
I think carbon tax Carney is actually more left-wing than Justin Trudeau, if that's possible, because he is a globalist, extreme environmental zealot, a radical. If he wasn't, the radical environment minister, Stephen Guilbeault, who's been arrested a bunch of times, wouldn't be supporting him on his agenda. And the most laughable thing is he says, I'm going to get rid of the consumer carbon tax and I'm going to replace it with what? Another carbon tax.
Yes, exactly.
And the only reason he supports the consumer carbon tax, in fact, his criticism constantly of Justin Trudeau on it was that it didn't go up fast enough and wasn't expensive enough. That it wasn't that it didn't work, it was that it wasn't expensive enough and pushing prices up high enough. That was his criticism of it. And he says the only reason we should get rid of it now is because Canadians don't like it, not because he has abandoned the idea. So here's what he'll do. He'll just increase it on the manufacturers of things. So he'll bury it so you don't see it as much. But, you know, there isn't a business in this world that says, you know what, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to absorb that new tax. I'm going to pass it on to the consumer. So it will still drive up the cost of producing food, of trucking food, of selling food, and everything else in this country, anything you buy. But he went one step further. He said, I'm actually going to put in another carbon tax. And it's on anything that we bring into Canada from a country that doesn't have a carbon tax. So it's carbon tax 3. Carney's carbon tax 3 is he wants to put a carbon tax and put a huge, huge cost on Canadians on everything else that comes into this country because nobody else has a carbon tax of stuff we input. Whether it's the stuff from China or the United States, we import a lot of things from the United States. We do $1 trillion of exchange of goods with the United States every year. They don't have a carbon tax. So he wants to impose a carbon tax on everything we bring in from the United States.
Yeah, that's insane. Really, when we're fighting, with everything going on in the United States, how we need to be more competitive, all this talk about carbon taxes making our manufacturing sector and many others, agriculture and others, very uncompetitive and harder to do business. And this is not what we need when we're trying to stabilize our economy and grow it.
Imposing taxes on Canadians, a carbon tax is a tax on Canadians, is really inefficient. We have this massive productivity problem. 10 years ago, we earned essentially the same as the average American did and had basically the same buying power. Today, we earn 40% less than Americans. Now, that didn't happen just because Canadians decided to, not work as much. It happened because of the specific policies of this government that have driven business investment out of this country. $500 billion over the last few years went alone of capital from Canada to the United States. Money goes where it can make the most money, and because we've become so unproductive with all these taxes and regulations that the Liberals have put in place and that Mark Carney wants to expand, the capital went to the U.S. where it can make more money. So Canadian businesses are investing and getting better returns in the U.S., helping produce better jobs and better income for Americans. That's where Canadian capital is going. Our goal as a government under Pierre Poilievre is to make sure that the investment climate here, through lower regulation and more competitiveness in our industries, attracts that money back, that we become the place that capital from Canada and around the world wants to come to, which will produce a better and more productive economy and ultimately put more money in the jeans of every Canadian.
Well, the Liberals' policy was so bad that Mark Carney took his own company to New York. That says it all.
Yeah, isn't that incredible, right?
Yeah.
The guy says he doesn't want oil and gas in Canada, but he runs a company called Brookfield that invests in oil and gas pipelines around the world. The guy says that we are not productive and we should have these unproductive carbon taxes, but the company he runs says, well, it's too costly to operate in Canada, so we'll move to the U.S. where we don't have to pay these taxes. Like, talk about a hypocrite. Maybe you say that's a typical Liberal to say one thing and do another. And
Mark Carney, the pain doesn't affect him, right?
Right, it doesn't.
He's just too wealthy.
He said in an interview a couple of weeks ago on CTV in Halifax, he asked the interviewer when they were talking about steel tariffs, he said, when's the last time you bought steel?
Yeah.
I guess he didn't realize the building he was in was built from steel, that the camera he was looking at was made from steel, that the car he drove in over the bridges in Halifax were both made from steel. And when his servants go into his kitchen to get him a bottle of champagne, that fridge is made from steel.
Most likely, yes. I'm sure he has the top
But
quality.
apparently he doesn't realize, he said, when's the last time you bought steel?
Well, when you're not impacted by these things, and it's just stuff the people worry about,
people
right?
do,
It's
yeah.
just,
So he made his millions on Wall Street, as a corporate raider type guy. And then to assuage his ethical issues about doing that, he becomes this left-wing socialist and says, now that I've made all my money,
Yeah, exactly.
none of you can make
I
any
can
money.
pull the ladder up behind me. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like the rest of you can't follow me,
Yeah.
but I'm going to tell you what to do. What did your parents say when you were a kid? You know, do as I do, not as I preach, you know, type of thing.
Yeah.
And apparently he doesn't practice what he
No,
preaches.
no, not at all. Well, we're pretty much out of time, but I could keep going, but I appreciate you coming on.
Let's go for another hour.
All right, well, I'll give you another chance. The guests get the last word. The floor is yours.
Well, Canadians have a choice in the next month or two, hopefully, to make a choice between a clear plan that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives had to restore the dream that people have that's been lost in this country, that if you work hard and you put yourself and your nose to the grindstone, that you can achieve anything, you can have a home for you and your family, you can afford to put food on your table, and that your kids will have a better life. Not the last 10 years that we've had here. And so don't be fooled by switching the left-wing liberal at the top of the house for them. They're just the same. All of them are just the same, perhaps even worse than Justin Trudeau. But there'll be a lot of Laurentian elite, mainstream traditional media that just like him because he's got banker hair and banker socks. That's the only difference between him and Justin Trudeau, is he has banker hair and banker socks. Justin Trudeau's is different. But Canadians have a choice. They have a choice between having a more prosperous future or following the continued path of these Liberals destroying our economy.
Rick Perkins, Member of Parliament for South Shore St. Margaret's, the critic for industry. Thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
And as you said, it's the same bus route, same bus company. It is just the driver that's being changed out. So remember that. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. Your friends can download it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. We have new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Until next week, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.